Dr. Murdock, can you tell me a little bit your reason here today? We know you're a speaker, but why specifically this conference, and will you be touching on today in your presentation?
Well, what I'll be talking about is the demographic changes that are impacting all parts of the United States. And those changes include dramatic changes in the racial and ethnic composition of our population. All of the projections done by the Census Bureau and others, for example, show that by mid-century there will be more people who are non-white than there are white in the country as a whole. And that will be an unprecedented event. And the only implications of that, the only things that count about that, is that we need to ensure that all Americans have the skills and education they need to be competitive. Right now, we're not doing that. And we're going to have to, or we're going to be less competitive in the world in the future than we are today.
What types of things do school districts have to do for accommodate these changes that are inevitable?
The main thing is to ensure that your teachers, your administrators reflect to the extent you can the kids that you're going to be educating. I hear all the time from kids who say, I really like my school, except nobody who teaches me, no one who gives me instructions about what I should do looks like me. And that's an issue that it doesn't have to be totally consequential, but it's one that is consequential. And it's going to be a different America. If you look, for example, at our crowd today, people like me, we're going to be a minority in this country. And we're going to have to ensure, because right now we are not being successful with a sufficient number of minority kids to keep the America in educational terms in the future that we have today.
How do educators that may perhaps be a little apprehensive to these sort of changes, how do they maybe treat this with a bit of openness or open-mindedness?
I don't think that educators are necessarily closed-minded about this issue. I think that we all kind of look at the America we live in, the Texas we live in, whatever it is, and we think that it looks like us. In some cases it does, in other cases it doesn't. Non-Hispanic whites have not been in replacement fertility, nor has immigration or migration made up for it. So that the reality is that people that look like you and I will be a minority of all populations. Now, the only implications of that is if we don't change the socioeconomics, including levels of education and the related income and so forth that comes from it, we will be a poor and less competitive America in the future than we are today. So we have to ensure that minority kids get the education and skills they need to be competitive in an increasingly international economy. If we fail to do that, we will see a poor and less competitive America.
And how will that have a detriment effect, I guess, on our place in the world and as a superpower?
Well, clearly this is a problem. We have kept, one of the things that has kept us where we are as a public school system that ensure that all kids, wherever they came from, whatever socioeconomic base they had, could get an education. It could make them competitive. This is not everywhere in the world the same. Many places have tests that people take and they weed them out at various stages, and so the number of kids that go to college is a smaller proportion than is true in the United States. So keeping all of our kids competitive, whatever their socioeconomic or other characteristics, is critical to the country. We cannot be successful in the future. And we'll show some data today that will show where we go if nothing changes.
And I know you've studied demographics for a while. You've been a part of the Census Bureau. What fascinates you about these changes?
Well, because what fascinates me about them is the fact that they're not just changes that are interesting. They are changes that change what happens to us socially, economically, competitively, and they're changes that if we don't pay attention to, the long-term trend suggests we would be poor and less competitive America in the future than we are today.
And finally, what do you hope that the superintendents take away from your presentation today and bring back to their specific districts?
Well, I think most of the superintendents here will be aware of the demographics we're going to talk about. And I think that for many cases, if you look at old Anglos like myself, what we need to be preparing for is ensuring that those that are following us are increasingly representative of the population of the United States. It does make a difference in terms of kids that are being educated, who is educating them, and to the extent to which they can associate with and identify with those teachers, those administrators, so they say, oh, I can be that person. I can be a superintendent or a principal or a science teacher or social science teacher or whatever. And I think one of the things that is critical is to ensure that all kids see that future.
Wonderful. And just one last thing. Why this conference? Why did you decide to come here specifically?
Well, I came to this conference, in fact, because the convener of this conference, who had heard me at other events, asked if I would come and do a presentation on an issue that I've done presentations on for now 30 years. Because the demographics we're talking about are not new. A friend of mine likes to say, he says, who's a minority, says, the good news is that, he said, old white guys like you are disappearing. which I always say, well, I don't know if that's a very, but he means it in the sense that we're getting bodies that are more representative of the total population of the world. And, that's been unique to America in a very broad sense. European systems are much more selective, and you are kind of selected out of the go to college fairly early. We've kept colleges and universities open to people who could do the academic work that was necessary, and we've got to continue to do that, particularly when you look at the demographics now that are taking place.